You feel the arrow before you hear it. The shaft punches through your shield with a crack that rattles your teeth, and for 7 days now, you've done nothing but endure. Your brothers are dying beside you, their screams swallowed by drums that haven't stopped since dawn. And every instinct in your body screams to charge. But you don't, because the moment you break formation, 30,000 warriors circling like wolves will tear you apart. The heat inside your armor has become a kind of madness, 115 degrees of Palestinian sun, cooking you alive in 40 pounds of chainmail. And then, after 7 days of hell, you hear it. 3 trumpet blasts, the sound that will either save 12,000 men or doom them all in the next 17 minutes. Drop a comment from wherever you are. I'm always amazed this story reaches from Tokyo to Sao Paulo, September 7th, 1191. The coastal plains of the Levant, 12,000 exhausted crusaders somehow obliterated 30,000 of the Islamic world's finest warriors in less time than it takes to say morning prayers. 700 Christian casualties, 7,000 Muslim dead. A 10-to-1 kill ratio that medieval warfare said was impossible. But what the chronicles don't tell you is this: those 17 minutes had been building for 7 agonizing days. 7 days of a trap within a trap. 7 days where the hunter became the hunted without even knowing it. 3 things happened before the sun set that day that historians still argue about. A knight disobeyed a direct order and should have doomed his entire army. A king made a split-second decision that violated every rule of medieval warfare. And the age of Saladin's invincibility died screaming. But to understand how 12,000 men destroyed 30,000, we need to go back. Back to when the greatest Muslim general who ever lived chose the wrong kind of torture. Richard the Lionheart stood on the walls of Acre and looked south toward Jerusalem. The 33-year-old King of England had just won a brutal 2-year siege, but the Holy City was still 80 miles away. Between him and salvation stretched the coastal road narrow, exposed, perfect for ambush. Across the dusty plains, Saladin watched and smiled. The 53-year-old Sultan knew crusader psychology like he knew the Koran. Knights were bred for offense. Make them march in the heat, bleed them with arrows, provoke them until discipline snapped. Then, when they charged like they always did, lighter Muslim cavalry would surround them, cut them down. It had worked at Hattin 4 years earlier, when Saladin annihilated an entire crusader army and captured Jerusalem. But Richard had studied Hattin, and what he did next broke every rule of medieval warfare. August 25th, 1191. The crusader army forms up at its heart 2,000 mounted knights in 40 pounds of chainmail, 300 Hospitallers and the vanguard warrior monks whose black crosses marked them as the most disciplined fighters in Christendom, 300 Templars guarding the rear. Master Garnier de Nablus commanded the Hospitallers, 42 years old. Veteran of 20 campaigns, a man whose entire identity was defined by aggressive action. For the next 7 days, Richard would ask him to do the one thing warrior monks found harder than death. Nothing. The order was explicit. No one charges without the signal. 3 trumpet blasts. Any man who broke formation faced execution, even as brothers died, even as Muslim cavalry mocked them, shouting insults, questioning their manhood. "Let them waste arrows on our shields," Richard told his commanders. Our time will come, but he didn't tell them when. He didn't tell them that every mile of suffering was calculated bait, because Saladin was about to take that bait, and it would cost him everything. Day 1, September 3rd. The first arrows arc from the eastern hills at dawn, not a concentrated valley, a constant, maddening drizzle. Saladin's horse archers sweep in, loose their shafts, wheel away. This isn't meant to destroy, it's meant to torment. A hospitaller knight takes an arrow through his eye slit. He falls without a sound. His brothers watch him die and do nothing. The urge to charge burns in every warrior's heart. Day 2 brings escalation. The arrows fall heavier. Another horse screams and collapses, 3 shafts through its legs. Its rider goes down hard. Turkish horsemen descend on him like ravens. Richard's response shocks everyone. He slows the march. Instead of covering 80 miles in 4 days, he orders just 10 miles per day, 8 days instead of 4. It seems like madness, giving Saladin more time, more opportunities to attack. Muslim sources report loosing over 400,000 arrows in 3 days. The crusader formation holds crossbowmen take their toll. Saladin loses 400 men, but it's a price he's willing to pay. By day 3, some young knights crack. They spur forward, break formation, die surrounded by circling horsemen, their screams carrying back to the column. Richard orders their bodies left where they fell. But here's what the chronicles don't tell you. Richard wasn't losing control. He was buying time. Day 4, the heat becomes deadlier than arrows. September in Palestine means 115 degrees. Every crusader carried 40 pounds of metal that became an oven under the sun. Water was rationed. Men march in full armor while sweat blinds them, while their tongues swell from thirst. Contemporary accounts describe knights marching with a dozen arrows protruding from their armor like porcupine quills. One Templar reportedly continued fighting with 6 arrows in his body, only collapsing when the 7th pierced his neck. Day 5 brings coordinated attacks on the rear guard. The Templars are forced to ride backwards in their saddles, facing the enemy while their horses are led by squires. It's humiliating. Brilliant. They present a wall of steel. Master Garnia de Nobles watches his hospitallers bleed without striking back. Every man sports wounds. Dead horses line their path. His sergeants report the men are at their limit. They speak of charging with or without orders. Richard shifts forces, but won't speed the march, won't give Saladin the running battle he craves. 10 miles, 8 miles, 6 miles. Each mile costs blood. The sound alone was psychological warfare. Muslim drums thunder from dawn to dusk, never stopping. Cymbals crash. War cries mix with arrow whistles. It's designed to break men's minds before their bodies. And then came day 7, September 6th. The day Saladin made his fatal mistake. That night, Saladin realizes the Crusaders haven't broken. They're 5 miles from Arsuf's fortified camp. Tomorrow, they reach safety. His window is closing. The Sultan makes a fateful decision. Commit everything. Across the camp, Richard gathers his commanders. Torchlight flickers across exhausted faces. Tomorrow, Saladin will throw everything at us, the Lionheart says quietly. He must. It's his last chance. When he does, when he finally commits his reserves, thinking we're finished, Richard doesn't finish the sentence. Every commander understands. 7 days of appearing vulnerable, 7 days of luring Saladin into exactly this moment. Did Richard plan this all along? Military historians still argue. But what happened next suggests the Lionheart had been waiting for this moment since the march began. Dawn breaks on September 7th, 1191. The Crusader column forms up one last time. Battered, bloodied, unbroken, just 5 miles to safety. But Muslim scouts report the rear guard is barely holding. The Sultan has no idea he's staring at the jaws of a trap, one that's about to close with 17 minutes of pure violence. 9 o'clock. 30,000 Muslim warriors flood from the eastern hills like a dark tide. Saladin has committed his entire host. His nephew, Taqi-ad-Din, commands 8,000 veteran cavalry on the right. The center holds 10,000 Mamluks under Saladin's direct command. The first assault strikes the Hospitaller rearguard like a hammer. Thousands of horse archers converge, darkening the sky. The drumming reaches deafening levels. Hospitaller losses mount catastrophically. A knight topples with an arrow through his neck. Master Garnier de Nablus grips his reins with white knuckles. 7 days of suppressed rage boil over. He watches Taqi-ad-Din himself charge directly at the Hospitaller standard, a calculated insult. I can bear this no longer. The master's cry carries over the din. Without waiting for Richard's signal, without orders, he couches his lance. 300 Hospitallers see their leader move, and instinct takes over. They charge, breaking formation, throwing away 7 days of discipline in 7 seconds. But Richard sees the Hospitallers break and makes a split-second decision. In 3 seconds, he chooses now. Now bear aid to the Hospitallers. 3 trumpet blasts split the morning air, the sound every crusader has been praying for. 2,000 knights explode into motion. Discipline holds. They maintain formation. Hospitallers on the right, Templars on the left. Richard with the center. 3 iron wedges accelerate toward the Muslim line. The ground shakes under 8,000 hooves. Crusader war horses reach full gallop. Muslim horse archers who've been dancing out of reach for days suddenly realize they're no longer hunters. Impact velocity, 35 miles per hour. A mounted knight at full charge generates kinetic energy equivalent to a car crash. The 12-foot lances strike first. The lighter Muslim cavalry simply can't withstand the mass and momentum. The first Muslim line doesn't break. It disintegrates. Lances shattered, but the knights don't slow. They draw swords and become cutting machines. Each knight is a killing triangle. Rider above, horse below, momentum carrying both forward. Master Garnier, first into the enemy, personally cuts down 3 emirs. The Hospitallers don't just fight, they butcher. 7 days of rage released in 17 minutes of slaughter. Muslim warriors who stood firm against ordinary charges break and run, and in that moment, an empire's confidence began to die. Richard's center wedge smashes into the Mamluk core. The Lionheart leads from the front, his sword rising and falling in death's rhythm. Eyewitnesses describe him as a giant, dealing death with every blow. The Templars, seeing success, adjust their angle. They strike the Muslim flank just as Taqi-ad-Din's wing crumbles. It's hammer and anvil. Muslims caught between Hospitaller fury and Templar precision die by the hundreds. Saladin watches his center evaporate. His personal guard forms around him as the Mamluk elite, his finest warriors, simply cease to exist as a fighting force. The Sultan tries to rally reserves, but panic is contagious. What Saladin sees in that moment will haunt him forever. Richard the Lionheart, blood-soaked, leading a third charge directly at the Sultan's position. This isn't controlled combat seeking ransom. This is extermination. Saladin's banner falls not, captured but abandoned as its bearers flee. The greatest Muslim general of the age is swept away in the rout, his bodyguard dragging him from the field, from first impact to total collapse. 17 minutes, Knights pursue fleeing Muslims for 3 miles. The killing only stops when war horses can run no more. Even then, crossbowmen continue picking off stragglers until Richard sounds recall. The counting began immediately, and what they found defied belief. The Crusaders had charged with 2,000 knights. They returned with 1,950. Total Crusader casualties, 700, mostly infantry killed during morning harassment. The Muslim dead carpeted the plain. 7,000 bodies in 17 minutes. Medieval battles rarely produced such lopsided casualties. At Hastings, armies fought all day to produce 7,000 dead total. At Arsuf, that was just the Muslim toll. High-ranking emirs, identified by their rich armor, lay twisted in the dust. Richard's knights begged to pursue. We can destroy them completely. On to Jerusalem. But the Lionheart maintained strategic clarity. No, we march to Arsuf as planned. The decision shocked everyone, yet Richard ordered reform, collect wounded, continue the methodical march. Why? Because he understood the army was exhausted. 7 days had drained them. Pursuit into unknown territory could turn triumph into disaster. Discipline had won the day. Lack of discipline could still lose it. Within days, the psychological shockwave rippled across the Levant. Saladin's aura of invincibility built since Hatton shattered like his battle line. A Muslim chronicler wrote 3 days later, the Franks fought like demons that day. Their charge was as the day of judgment. Another described it. They came like mountains of iron rolling down upon us. But the real genius wasn't the charge itself. It was what the charge represented. Richard had turned Saladin's greatest strength mobilitin to a trap. By enduring 7 days of torment, by appearing vulnerable, he'd lured the Sultan into committing for a decisive battle. Then he'd sprung the trap with perfect timing. If Richard had charged too early, the Muslims could have withdrawn. If he'd waited too long, the Hospitallers would have been destroyed. The margin between disaster and triumph measured in heartbeats. Those 17 minutes were purchased with 7 days of superhuman restraint. In the Knights Hospitaller archives in Malta, a damaged journal entry from Master Garnier was discovered in 1843. Written 3 weeks after Arsuf, his hand still shaking. We broke formation. We should have died. Instead, we witnessed the day discipline became divine. Jaffa opened its gates without resistance when Richard approached. Ashkelon's garrison began negotiations. The coastal road to Egypt lay exposed. But more than territory had changed. A doctrine had died. The Sultan never again met Crusader knights in open battle. The psychological wound outlasted the physical casualties. In subsequent encounters, Muslim cavalry showed reluctance to close with formed knights. Saladin remained a great commander, but his troops never forgot Arsuf. The myth of invincibility, once shattered, could never be rebuilt. Within weeks, Saladin agreed to negotiations he'd previously scorned. Jerusalem, while never recaptured, became a point of negotiation rather than non-negotiable jihad. One battle changed the entire strategic calculus of the Third Crusade. But there's one more thing that chronicles barely mention. You're back where we started. 40 pounds of chainmail in 115-degree heat. 7 days of arrows. 7 days of watching brothers die unavenged. But now you know why Richard made you wait. The trumpet blast that saved 12,000 men. The split-second decision that violated every rule. The restraint that became the deadliest weapon in medieval history. Modern military academies still study Arsuf as a masterclass in operational patience. The battlefield at Arsuf is empty now. Wheat fields cover the ground where 7,000 men bled out in less time than morning prayers. But if you stand there at dawn, when the heat starts building, you can almost hear it. The thunder of 8,000 hooves, the screams of men who realized too late they weren't hunting anymore. In war, as Richard proved that September morning, victory belongs not to the strongest or the most numerous. It belongs to those who choose the perfect moment to unleash hell. The age of Saladin's invincibility ended in 17 minutes. But those 17 minutes taught a lesson that echoes across 8 centuries. Sometimes the hardest battle isn't fought with swords, it's fought with patience. And the true courage isn't attacking, it's enduring until the perfect moment arrives. Then striking without mercy, without hesitation. That's what 12,000 did to 30,000. That's what discipline does to chaos.